Welcome to the section how I tune my quad that consists the PIDs, that consists the rates, and that also consists the filtering, which is part of the tuning. So how do you get there? You open Betaflight, you connect your drone, you have here a section in Betaflight called PID tuning, and when you go in there, that's basically what you see. Here the numbers are slightly different. That's because I already have my flight controller configured, but basically what you see here, that's the default value. Let me give you a quick overview about PID. Everything is related to like the error. So P is like proportional, that's the present error. Then you have like the I term, that's the past error, and the D term is basically the future prediction. And if all these three work nicely together, you get like a good feedback on your drone, like a good flight behavior. It's very technical, and I will put in the description a link, a nice article where you can read through and probably have to read it a couple of times until it makes sense. But then hopefully you understand better what the P, the I, and the D actually do. To make it extremely simple, P, you can consider that as the responsiveness of the drone. And I term, you can think of how stiff is the drone, how easily can it drift basically. And the last one, the D term, is basically the damping, the oscillation part, which counteracts certain oscillations. So when you have a high P term, that means it's very responsive. Like if you want to go into the turns with a high P, you can go into really nice in the curves. When the I terms are high, the drone is really stiff. It also, you can see I as how it counteracts against external forces. So that means when you do a turn or like when wind is there, you can especially see it with wind, how good the I term is set. So a high I term is very stiff and a low I term is very loose. I personally prefer lower I values because then the drone is also like very less stiff and makes it almost, for me, a little bit more cinematic. The last one is the D term. D term I've seen plays a big role with prop wash. Prop wash is like basically, let's imagine you fly and you let your drone, you fly in one direction, you turn your quad, you let it going down, and then you immediately accelerate. You can see that there will be like some bigger vibrations of the quad. And you don't want to have these because if you do some freestyle or if you fall in some like dead air, you can see that the quad starts wobbling, and the higher the D term, the less it starts vibrating. So if the quad is coming down and you have a high D term, you almost have like no vibrations when it's recovering. But you have to be careful with the D terms because too high D terms, you're going to burn your motor. So you want to have enough D term to filter out that prop wash, but you don't want to have too much D term, otherwise you get super hot motors. And exactly. So if you look at, you can play with these numbers if you're pro, but I like to play with these sliders first. They make it simpler. And please keep in mind the P and the I and the D, they always affect the roll, the pitch, and the yaw. And the article which I list, it also explains how you basically tune it step by step. It cannot be done in just a tutorial. For me, it took a lot of flights, a lot of hours, a lot of practice until I start feeling it. So first you start tuning the P. When the P is nicely tuned, you're going to start with the I term. And the last one is you touch the D term, and then you also have the yaw, and yaw, you only tune it after you have tuned roll and pitch. It's very complicated, but in that article you have literally a step-by-step approach, and it also explains you how you basically test it. For example, one example is like the one I said, you're going to fly, you punch, you turn your drone 180 degrees, you give zero throttle, let it fall down, and you quickly you quickly accelerate, and when it starts like wobbling a lot like this prop wash, you know, okay, I have to increase the D and also the filtering. Or you do turns and you feel, the drone is really not responsive, and that's not because, of course, the props play a role, but if it's not responsive and not stiff, you know that you have to play with the P and the I terms to really tune it. So you see here, you cannot influence the I term. Beta flight devs, they don't like that you mess around with the I terms. So what I usually do is I just lower the master multiplier by 0.1, so I get the I terms down. Then what I like to do next is I can go up here with the P and the D, and I like to go up to this part like 1.2, 1.3, and you can see that the P's are going up and the D's are going up. Important is you don't want to have too high P's, like around 50 or like, yeah, 50 I would say is, or like 55, because another thing which I explained is this bidirectional D shot. For this applied, it's better to have a little bit lower P terms. Then you can basically play around with this one. I usually do it manual. So first I'm gonna go up with the D's. Even here I increase sometimes a little bit. So here I'm gonna increase a little bit to like 1.1. So let's do another extreme. Let's do 1.1 here. First the P and the D up together, and then a little bit more on the D to get that D min up. But then I'm gonna reduce it here to values like, I like to have it lower, like 35 and 37. That's what I usually do, like a custom settings, or you can just like stay with the slider. And then here you have like the stick responsive gain, and you can really see that's the feed forward. So usually I go with the feed forward a little bit down or a little bit up. So personally, I would say I go a little bit more up with the feed forward. But I have another tip for you later, and they're gonna it also influences that. So let's put it up. So you have 0.9 there. You're gonna have 0.9 here, so a little bit less feed forward, so a little bit looser stick response. You're gonna have a little bit higher D term, which helps you with the prop wash, but you have also a little bit higher D mins, which also supports you with fast movement. On the left-hand side, very quickly, so anti-gravity is important, because if you do fast movements on your stick, fast movements on your drone, so fast like quick maneuvers, it boosts the I term for a short time, and that's important because if you do like a punch, you have more external forces, and you want to have that I term, so the stiffness also adjusted to that quick maneuver and the forces. So you want to have, for that short sequence, a higher I term, and that's exactly what anti-gravity is doing. If you put that number up, it boosts this I term by 3.5 times, or if you increase the number, as I said, like 5, it boosts the I term 5 times, or multiplies it 5 times. The D min is almost the same, but just like for the D term, so by fast maneuvers, it also basically infects the D min, or like the D term, when you do fast movements. Next one, the filtering. And when you start your quad, you will find the slider in the middle. And I've learned from a tutorial by Joshua Bartwell and by trying out myself that when you have a nicely built quad, like not damaged, props nice, you can basically go really hard on these sliders. So what I usually do, I put them all the way to the right. What you have to keep in mind, the more right you go, the less filtering you will have, the hotter the motor can become, but the better the prop wash handling. So I usually put the filters all the way to the right if I know I have built it nicely, and then I see already a pretty good prop wash handling. Because if the quad is nicely built, you need less filtering, and that's where you want to go forward. Exactly. So another thing is this gyro RPM filter. I haven't specialized, or I haven't focused too much, but what I have seen based on other tutorials, they suggest to have like 3 on the gyro RPM filtering, like the harmonic number, put it to 3, and then you have like 100 for this one. I'm not even sure if they put it now on the default, but that's like some nice good numbers. And here the same for these number 820, 15, 600. That's what I suggest, like with the newest firmware. These are the kind of things, if you use the older version, it's not going to work well. You want to constantly check. And I think Joshua Bardwell is a good one, since he goes for all of these topics super into detail. We'll link it in the description. And the good thing in there is like he dives in these topics. So whenever a new Betafly release is coming out, he explains how these numbers is going to change for the new system. So before jumping into the rates, I quickly want to show you something which I think is really useful. When you go to, there's like the Betafly, like from the developers, they also give some hints on the tuning. I have discovered that on one of the tutorials I've watched on the internet, and it was actually really useful. So before we have done like on this page there with the PID and the D-min, the anti-gravity and the filtering, and also change the number here. But the good thing is, and I would, even before you start with these adjustments here from the PIDs and the filters, I would take some quick settings from the devs, and they help a lot. You can see here for Pro Race, for Race and Fast Freestyle, for HD Smooth, that's what I do, cinematic smooth long range, or you can have full cinematic, and that's more like for the Cinewhoop type and less for these. You can have like almost like pre-settings. And what you see where the difference is, smoothing auto smoothness is like 5, 7, 20 and 40. You can see like the more cinematic it goes, this like RC smoothing autos goes up. Or a good one is also the feed forward transition, 70 super high, 40 lower, and then you have here like almost like at 0. You don't have that when you go like more for race and fast freestyle, because you want to have like sharp turns. And what I did is basically I took these settings. You can literally copy paste them, and you can put to the CLI tab. You copy all of them like in, press enter, and then you press save, and it sends you back, and you can go back in. So that's what I suggest when you have like a freestyle drone, but you want to do like the smooth FPV cinematic long range, then I would go with these values. When you have like a Cinewhoop, I would try these values. And if you don't want to change all of these, there's like one which is like, I would say the most crucial one, and that's this value here, the feed forward interpolation SP. So this value you can see for race you have it on 2, for HD you have it on average 3, and for super cinematic, and with that I mean like the Cinewhoop, you can have it on average 4. So if you want to do one thing and you don't want to do all the changes, just take that FF feed forward interpolation average 3 and copy that command there as a standalone, and then you press basically save, or like exactly you press save and you leave that tab, because I think that's like a really good feature from the new Betaflight 4.2. You can have here also like some suggesting. For example, you see if you get some issues with wobbles, here you say okay, you can lower the D term by 20%. That's also what I have seen. If you like get like, we said the D term, it helps you like to reduces these big wobbles, but it could be that you get micro vibrations. And then what I did is I start lowering the D term by 20% each time. So I lowered it from, for example, if I go here, if I connect it, if I connect, and I have here, for example, 40 and 45, I went down to like 35 and 38. I went down like to 32, 35, and I was like lowering the D term, like the D max every time, and to check if these micro wobbles go away. So here also like the thing go back to 24 kilohertz. We said before, my tip is like go with 48 kilohertz to have that smooth flight behavior, but maybe you want to go back to 24 if you get some issues. That's more kind of the troubleshooting. tips from the devs you can do if you get some issues. And also one of the features from the beta flight, you can see that it's, I think it's not up here, but what you can add, and that's a good thing, is the VBAD sag compensation. And what that does, that's also a new feature from beta flight 4.2, and I have that, is like when you have VBAD sag 100%, it takes a little, like if you plug it in, you have a full battery, it takes a little bit away from how hard you go on your battery from the power, and it puts it back at the end, because at the beginning you have a lot of power, you can do like massive punches, but then like we said, the battery sag is like how much the battery is like draining down, the power consumption goes down. But what you want is you want to have a more uniform flight behavior. So what that battery sag does, it takes a little bit of the power at the beginning and puts it back when it's more needed towards the end. So it's like it makes a more uniform curve. You can have that to 100%, but you could take that command, you go back to your CLI tab, you're going to write it, and I for example, I only want to have 30%, so just put 30%, you press enter, and you're going to save it, and then you have like only 30% of that feature of the VBAD compensation. To be honest, even if you have VBAD 100%, you're not going to realize it that much. Okay, that's basically my yeah, and you have here also like way more information if you get some issues. That's really like troubleshooting, and these are like the I would say the super like detailed pro tip if you want to really get the max out of your